Hey guys, how you doing? This will be my second attempt. My phone is funny. If I do anything on this phone, if somebody calls me on my phone while I'm trying to record, it just obliterates the video that I'm trying to record. Really kind of annoying, but such is life. Such is life. I had a good one too. I was talking about individualism, how I don't think that we should call it individualism anymore. We should call it selfishness because that's what it is. We don't. Um, for a system to be coherent and to make sense, it needs to have kind of a universal quality to it, right? Like all the religious structures, for example, they attempt to create a universal doctrine through what's called the Golden Rule, right? Do unto others as they would have them do unto you, that kind of thing. Individualism as an ideology does not work that way, right? That the individual structure, the structure of it is, well, if it works for me, I like it, and so it's an individual thing. And if it doesn't work for you, then there must be something wrong with you. And it's just selfishness at its base level. And the proponents of an individualism of this sort of system, they don't acknowledge reality. Like, this is why our politics are so divisive, and so why the populace has been divided, is that on the one side you have, like, on one side of the spectrum, I hate the left-right dichotomy, because I think it's completely inaccurate. Like, at this stage in the game, there are people who acknowledge that reality is real, and that we have to face it up, and that we have to acknowledge what is happening in front of us. And on the other side of it, you have people who deny that reality exists whatsoever. And then in the middle of that, if there is any middle, there are people who look and say, okay, reality is real, but we can negotiate with that as if we have power in this situation. Which I think is childish. Like, that's like looking at the face of God and being like, you know what, I think I'm right. God's like looking at you being like, you're definitely wrong. And you're like, I think I'm right. And we can't, we don't seem to be able to break free from that. That there's this rugged individualism that is built in to our society to some degree. And the individualists, or the selfishness, like the selfish people, they don't want to acknowledge that their own lived reality is not the universal reality, that there are many ways and many things that could happen to people. And they'll say things like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Just, just stand up again, all this kind of stuff. But they refuse to acknowledge that that is what we're doing. We are doing that, right? That this is what it looks like when you're living in a billionaire-dominated market, right? When you're living in a society that's been dominated by a small handful of billionaires, when people stand up and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, this is what it looks like, right? I have people on my Facebook feed, like people from my hometown, they keep putting up that just idiotic, like, take personal responsibility for yourself and all this, as if that's not what we're doing, right? Because when they say it, they're expecting people like, oh, you should start a business and be a CEO and take over things and do this and do that, as if we have any opportunities, right? As if, like, when these people were growing up, oh, and the worst are like the housewives who've never worked a day in their life, but like when they were growing up, university was essentially free. You could literally just graduate from high school and then go work a factory job and get a, like, I'm rewatching Married with Children, right? I'm rewatching Married with Children. Brilliant show, by the way. Brilliant show. There's a reason why it did very well. But I'm rewatching it, and like, Al Bundy is a shoe salesman, and he works in like a hole in the wall mall store selling shoes. Okay, he has a house a big house. Okay, it's a 3-level house, 2 kids, a wife who does not work, a car, and goes on vacation fairly regularly, right? And I mean, the point of the show is to illustrate that he's got all this and yet still has a certain degree of misery because he's not actually confronting the existential nature of his life and the existential nature of life itself, right? His day-to-day is so focused on just these sort of material kind of things. But here he is, and if that show got released today, it would be completely incoherent. The millennials would look at it and be like, what? This guy, how could this guy have this house, this wife, this car, these kids? What are you talking about? And that wasn't that long ago. I was in the 80s, right? And something I think about all the time, like, I get decried, and my generation, the millennials, get decried all the time because we took big risks with our education, right? We got degrees in my degree is in theater, right? We got degrees in gender studies, things like this, because why shouldn't we have? Because when we were growing up, even if that didn't work out, well, that's okay, right? Go work in like a factory job. You'll have a house and you can get a wife and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like when we started going to school, the picture of our society that we had been presented with was Al Bundy, right? The picture that we had been presented with when we were making the decisions about our future, we didn't realize the society that we had been presented was no longer going to exist. And this is fundamentally what has happened, that the society no longer exists. The mythical fairy tale of a single wage earner with a house and 2 kids, a car, a wife, all that's gone. And we're witnessing like the older generation who experienced that and then actively worked to dismantle it. And now, like, how do we respond to this? How do we respond to this idea that we had a society where an individual person can, by working like a minimum wage job, it's explicitly stated, it's a minimum wage job, live this sort of American dream of the house and the wife and the kids and all this kind of stuff. We had it, right? And we chose to dismantle it. We chose to dismantle it. Well, I didn't, certainly. And the millennials didn't, certainly. And this table was set for us to fail, right? Like the legs were sawed so that they would break the second we sat down at it. And then once we sit down at this broken table, and once we sit down at this destroyed society, where the presentation of what it was no longer existed, then we were told, we must be the problem, right? We must be the problem. And for like decades, I was shit on. My whole generation was shit on. We were told that, we're lazy, all this kind of stuff. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And meanwhile, no one's actually stating or respecting we are pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. You just refuse to acknowledge the disaster we've been living through, right? This is why disaster movies have become so popular. This is why it's so believable for us because this seems to be the trajectory of our existence, right? This seems to be what we have been living through. And it doesn't have to be this way, right? It doesn't. It's just that we are just beginning to wake up to what it's going to take to actually improve things and actually make things better. And what it's actually going to take is a mass mobilization of people. Like, There's a reason why when there was a climate change rally and like 100,000 people were in the streets of Toronto, there's a reason why Justin Trudeau stands up and pretends to be our ally, right? It's because he understands how scary this is, right? He understands how scary and terrifying it is for the political class to see 100,000 people rallying under an idea, because we could just walk down the street to the city hall and occupy it, which we should do, without a doubt. We could go to the Parliament buildings. We could take all this over, right? 100,000 people marching onto the Prime Minister's house will change politics in this country. Absolutely, it will do that. But that's not how people think. People think that our politicians are actually at all interested in the well-being of our society, which hasn't been true for 40 years, and maybe longer than that even. Not a single one, right? Like they are all self-interested. They are all interested in themselves. And so our objective needs to be to terrify them to the point where they realize, like, oh yeah, if we don't actually do something, this could result in really, really bad stuff for us personally, right? Not in like an existential sort of sense, because they don't actually have this ability to see beyond themselves. Like, man, this is the thing that really gets me about liberals. And why I have come to believe that liberals are actually worse than conservatives, right? Like, conservatives are illiterate. Conservatives are, they don't actually know anything. They live in these little bubbles. I mean, they most of them, their whole life has been just like home, work, home, right? And maybe go to church, where they pray to a God who tells them to give their money to the poor, and then they do the exact opposite. But they don't know that because they're illiterate. And the capitalist profiteer, who they call their pastor, it certainly isn't going to tell them that. He's going to tell them to, give money to him, and that if you give money to me, God will bless you, which is like strictly heretical. But okay, so the conservatives come by their sort of sociopathic, cult-like ideology of death, honestly at least, right? They're at least stumbling into it because they're illiterate, because they don't know anything, and because they can't see the world outside of their own experience, right? And the truth, and I think this is actually true, like, I'm really mean to conservatives, okay? I'm really mean to conservatives. But I do think that conservatives, like, if you confront them with real abject poverty, right? If you confront them with real serious issues in their community, right? They'll open their wallet. They will. They'll open their wallet. They believe that they should have the exclusive right to be able to choose where they put their money, which is sort of this like distortion of thought. But so they think they should have $1 billion, and if they wish to bestow that money through the graciousness of their, like, this kind of arrogant narcissism that conservatives have about how they view the world. But at least they'll do it. Right? So there's some kind of thing in them, like there is a goodness there where they will extend charity, and they believe that charity is the way forward, even though it's completely inefficient and largely ineffective, and not actually a way to structure a society based on the whims of a small cabal of billionaires. Like, it's insane to think about. But at least they've come to this ridiculous position honestly, right? Liberals are the most dishonest people in the country, without a doubt, because they know better. How do we know they know better? Because they'll say it to your face. They'll say all of the things that you believe directly to your face, and then they'll vote against all of it 100% of the time. They will absolutely tell you that, oh yeah, income inequality is a real problem, and we've got to work to try and resolve these issues, and it's not good that the working class used to be able to a single wage earner used to be able to, all the stuff that I've been talking about, right? All the stuff that I've been talking about. A liberal will say it right to your face. He'll say all of that kind of stuff and be like, and I'm going to work for you in the House, and they won't. They will vote against you. They will literally say, yes, we need to raise taxes on the wealthy, and then vote against raising taxes for the wealthy. And so this is why I think liberals are worse than conservatives. Because conservatives are just deluded. Liberals are actively lying to you, right? They know better. They've been educated. They've seen the numbers. They understand how the system functions. They know how to improve the society, right? They're literate. They are they have the claim to empathy, right? But they don't give a fuck about you. They're just telling you what you want to hear, and they'll make any concession you want as long as it's not monetary. As long as it has nothing to do with economics, right? They'll wave the little flag, right? Black Lives Matter, gay pride, right? They'll go to whatever function you want. They'll do whatever you like, as long as it keeps you happy and billionaires rich. For sure, they'll go along with it. And if you go up to them and say, like, hey man, do you have any intention of doing anything about the billionaire class and how worthless and parasitic they are? They'll agree with you, right? This is why you shouldn't bother having conversations with liberals, because they're gonna agree with you. They're gonna say, like, yeah, this is a real thing, and I bring it up in the House all the time, and we need to have these conversations, all this kind of stuff, and then they'll vote against all of that 100% of the time. So I don't have any qualms saying that, like, liberals are worse than conservatives, and I feel like this is an important thing to say, because one of the things that continuously happens in every election in my lifetime is that people are like, oh, I better vote liberal because, the conservative, like, he can't get in. And I'm just, like, throwing my hands up at this and being like, let the conservative get in. Who the fuck cares? He's better, right? He's objectively better. It's objectively better to have a conservative in than a liberal, because conservatives will actually do something, right? You might not agree with it. Like, here's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, right? People are up in arms at the Ford administration here in Ontario, and they should be. I'm actually against this, but so the Ford administration is clearing space in the Greenbelt for development, right? Another environmental disaster for suburban houses, okay? And people are up in arms because it's yet another sacrifice on the environment when we need to be going exactly the opposite direction, and so on and so forth, right? So here's the thing. At least we're getting houses, right? At least we're getting houses, okay? At least they're doing something. At least they're building something. At least they're creating something, and they're attempting to do something and to solve a problem. Are they doing it stupidly and wrong? Yeah, but at least we're getting houses. You know what a liberal will do? A liberal will tell you, like, yeah, I care about the climate. Yeah, oh yeah, for sure I care about the climate. I'm going to do everything I can to help with the climate. And then they'll get into office and they'll do fucking nothing, right? Because they're bullshitting you the entire time. Or bullshitting themselves, and they don't realize how difficult, or they don't realize what it actually means to fight against climate. It means standing up to the billionaire class and telling them no, right? Which, given the way the system works, is actually a personal sacrifice, because once you're out of office, like, what all these politicians are doing is they're just angling for a job in the billionaire class. That when they get a job in office, what that actually is for them is a job interview for the billionaire class. And once they get out of office, which is an inevitability, that's how politics works, they're just angling for a sweet position with the billionaires where they don't have to do any work, and they just have to show up and give their advice every so often, right? Like a consultant, right? These worthless, meaningless positions that do nothing. You literally just show up and say, like, oh, this is my attitude on it. Really, you're just, hugging a billionaire and basically just saying, it's okay, your decisions are good. Here's a reason for why your decisions are good. Hug. And but that's what they're doing, right? So at least with conservatives, even if you disagree with their position, at least they're doing stuff, right? At least they're doing things that you could actually be like, oh yeah, I don't like that the Ford administration is going into the green belt and developing the green belt, but at least there's houses, right? At least there's that, right? What can you say about the Liberals? What? Outside of the legalization of marijuana, which I do think is a good thing that they did, like 8 years ago? What have they done? Fucking nothing, right? That's what they've done. They've done fucking nothing. All the while trying to toot their horn and tell you how great they are. Like, unbelievable, these guys. Unbelievable, these guys. And the problem right now, near as I can tell, like, when the Liberals voted against raising taxes on the wealthy by 1%, like the most tepid thing ever, I've noticed a spike in NDP activity, right? People are joining more NDP things. They're interested more in the NDP, which is good. I do think that's good. The problem is that that right now we have an NDP leader who is saying all the, like, don't get me wrong, I actually think Jagmeet Singh is saying all the right things, and he's making all the right moves, and he's doing the right stuff. I wish he was more... I've said this about the NDP the whole time, but I wish that he was more forceful in the way he's talking, but he can't be. And the reason he can't be is because Canadians are very racist. It's something that we don't like to talk about, and something we don't like to admit as Canadians, because we like to believe that we're better than Americans when we're not. But the reality is Canadians are extremely racist, and will look at a guy with a big, like a brown guy with a big beard and a turban, and that'll be the end of it for him, right? That'll be the end of it. Like, it doesn't matter that he is moving forward on policies that have supermajority support amongst the Canadians, amongst Canadian people. It doesn't matter that he's standing up and being like, hey, pharmacare, can we actually do that? It doesn't matter that he's standing up and saying, like, yeah, we should raise taxes on the wealthy. It doesn't matter that he's standing up and saying, yeah, we should have a basic income. It doesn't matter that he's standing up and saying, like, we should move on these very popular ideas. And has anyone else noticed that the Liberals and the Conservatives are just not interested in doing any of that? And it doesn't matter, because he's a Sikh. He's a brown Sikh. And that's it. And Canadians are racist, and so they won't do it. Like, feel free to prove me wrong, Canada. Like, feel free to prove me wrong. But, like I said in one of my previous videos, and I completely agree with it, like, if you're voting Liberal and Conservative, you're suffering from some kind of mental illness. And racism is amongst that, right? And I definitely believe that there are lots of Canadians who won't vote NDP, because they'll end up in the ballot box, and they'll get hit with that same old, like, oh, Liberal, Conservative, if I don't vote for the Liberal, then the Conservative will probably get in, and the NDP guy, I don't know, right? And it'll just be the same nonsense over and over again. And we are literally going to be a generation behind our European neighbors, right? Like, in Europe, they most, with the exception of the UK, because, big surprise, the places where capitalism entrenches itself more, maintains the decay of the democratic process. But, like, it's interesting how we talk, like, a lot about the UK, but we're not actually talking about other European nations very often, because the other European nations destroyed their Conservative and Liberal Party, right? And I don't mean they, like we've done, where we have, like, oh, there's an NDP and, like, a Green Party and all that kind of stuff. I mean that literally those parties are gone. They no longer have support. They don't have seats in the House. That the other parties stood up and said, like, you guys work for corporations. You're working for corporate capitalists. Get out. And they did. They got out. The populace obliterated them. I'm thinking about, like, Portugal, Spain, Greece. Did Germany? No, Germany still has, like, their old guard, but they're weak, right? They're not very strong. Because I think the German people, they have a historical understanding that, oh, you need to be directly involved in your politics or else bad things happen. So many European nations have already gotten rid of their version of the Liberal and Conservative Party, right? We should do the same. We should absolutely do the same. And all the seeds are there, right? We've done it previously. Like the Orange Wave was an obliteration of the Liberal Party, which we should obliterate the Liberals at least, right? They're obviously just a wing of corporate power. They don't actually care about the populace. They've done nothing for us. Like they've done literally nothing for us. And so we should just decimate them. And a redo of the Orange Wave would really do it. The problem is that like you have Quebec, and Quebec is voting for like openly voting for legislation that is very racist, right? Against their Muslim population. So chances are good that they're not going to do an Orange Wave for Jagmeet Singh, right? Like that's probably not going to happen. That's probably not on the cards. But it has happened in the past, historically. And like we've obliterated our Liberal Party in the past. They rebuilt under Justin Trudeau. We've obliterated our Conservative Party in the past. They rebuilt under Stephen Harper. I don't see any reason why we can't just obliterate them simultaneously. Just get them completely out of our politics. So that we can actually start making adult decisions to face the legitimate problems that we're going to be confronted with very shortly. Like, here's something that's going around. I'm just riffing all over the place, guys. You know what? I actually think I have to close this out. I'll talk about Biden next time. I hope you guys are all doing well. Good luck out there, okay? Goddamn, we're all gonna need it. Like, share, subscribe, send it around. If you made it this far for real and you haven't subscribed, please do. I have almost 70 subscribers. I'm trying to get up to 70 to make me feel good about myself, really. Okay, guys, good luck out there. I love you all.